The biggest wrestling event of the summer is fast approaching, and it seems that the WWE might be content with its card for the night. However, there are some notable wrestlers omitted from the card, and we're not talking about the Colognes who haven't been on a pay-per-view since last year's Survivor Series. We're talking the likes of the big dog Roman Reigns, as well as other wrestlers like Lacey Evans, Baron Corbin and Braun Strowman, all missing from the card entirely. Why are they missing? Well, let's look at reasons, as well as possible reasons for some as to why they're not being featured. Keep in mind though, WWE could add a random match or matches at the last minute. We'll look at that as well as some of the latest wrestling news. But first, let's look at the missing superstars. Number 1. Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan. We could be wrong, but in the last year or so, when has the WWE omitted to include a healthy Roman Reigns from a pay-per-view? As you might be aware, it was revealed on SmackDown this week that Eric Rowan was behind the attacks on Roman Reigns, as Murphy, who was clearly under duress at the time, admitted to Reigns backstage that he saw Rowan. Whilst many thought the reveal would lead to a match at SummerSlam against the culprit, WWE seems to have held off any payoff this Sunday and may look to extend the storyline by involving Murphy. Now, Roman Reigns will surely appear at the event even if he doesn't have a match scheduled, as Dave Meltzer recently mentioned. I can't imagine them having a SummerSlam and not having Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan on the show at all. So I mean, they're not going to wrestle, but they may do the reveal or something like that on the show or something. Obviously they're going to continue with the angle and it's going to lead to something, on the following pay-per-view I guess. So that angle is going and they lost their timing on it and now it's not ready for the pay-per-view. Don't be surprised however if at the last second WWE adds a Roman Reigns vs Buddy Murphy match, as Wrestling Insider WrestleVotes tweeted that this could be a possibility. There were discussions last night about adding Roman Reigns vs Buddy Murphy to the SummerSlam card after the angle that went down on SmackDown. Source said it wasn't decided either way yesterday, but it remains a possibility as we get closer to the show this weekend. Number 2. Braun Strowman. The last time we saw Braun Strowman, he confronted the newly crowned first ever pregnant champion Maria Kanellis. He didn't say anything or do anything, and he wasn't seen on the Go Home episode of Raw either. And for a person who wants to main event WrestleMania 36, he's got a long way to go as he's not even on the card for SummerSlam. His segment with Maria could imply that he'll be involved in a 24/7 segment, however some believe he is being left out due to some minor injuries and want him to be 100% before possibly rebuilding him back into a legitimate monster, tearing down everything in sight. Number 3. The Usos. Although the WWE would like to put the talented tag team into a match, both men's DUI arrests are likely to keep them from crossing into Canada. Canada is serious about keeping people out of its country with certain criminal records, and for the WWE, it's probably not worth the trouble of getting them into the country for a couple of nights when there are so many other tag teams available. This might even be seen as an indirect punishment for Jimmy Uso's recent DUI arrest in Florida. Number 4. The Undertaker. It was rumoured for many weeks after The Undertaker's return to Extreme Rules, where he teamed with Roman Reigns, that he'd be inserted into a feud with Drew McIntyre, who also seems missing from the card, but that information may have turned out to be false, or WWE may have changed their minds at the last minute, as no such match or feud has been hinted at. It's no surprise as The Undertaker has been used sparingly over the past year, and the next possible appearance might be just before the Survivor Series pay-per-view in November. But in regards to that specific feud, WWE might be saving it for WrestleMania, as McIntyre is currently in a feud with Cedric Alexander. It's possible that that match could be added last minute. Number 5. Bobby Lashley. The WWE's big man suffered an injury in July, but there's no word on the exact nature of it or when he will return. Many are reporting that he's getting bone spurs removed from his elbow, but it's expected he'll return sometime in November, probably in time for the Survivor Series pay-per-view. Number 6. All of the tag team champions. Isn't it strange that there won't be a single tag match on the card, as the entire card is filled with singles matches? Is that the theme of SummerSlam? We're not sure, but that could be a possible reason why both the Raw and SmackDown tag team champions don't seem to be present on the card. One thing's for sure is that Vince is not a big fan of the Women's Tag Team Championship, as some pointed it out to be a last-minute decision to unveil them earlier than expected, giving reason to the awful booking it's recently received. Number 7. The Miz. The Miz was bumped off the card for Goldberg as he will not do battle with Ziggler on Sunday. Whilst this was seemingly the plan all along and not a last minute change, The Miz recently spoke on not wanting to be in pay-per-view matches that, in his words, no one cares about. Speaking with Newsweek, he mentioned, "I have a problem with being the center of attention. I don't want to just be thrown in a cold match that no one cares about. What we are as WWE superstars are storytellers. If I'm not involved in a story that people are invested in, that people want to see, then no. You rather let people who are in story to get the time that they need to tell that story, to be the people to steal the show." Now, we wouldn't say a Miz vs Ziggler match wouldn't be interesting, but they have fought so many times it's hard to get invested into another match. Whilst the match will no doubt be a squash between Ziggler and Goldberg still proves to be a huge draw. Number 8. Sami Zayn and Aleister Black. A match between these two could have stolen the show, but thanks to time constraints, it was moved to SmackDown Live this week. Dave Meltzer recently spoke on the chain saying, "So the deal with Aleister Black and Sami Zayn was when Vince showed up and didn't like SmackDown, he tore the whole script apart. When he was done with the stuff he didn't like and then changed the main event, they had an hour to fill. And so one of the ideas for that hour was, well, what can we do in this hour? Let's put Aleister Black's match with Sami Zayn on." So that was one of the things they did to fill the hole. They took that off the pay-per-view, and that's the reason that's off the pay-per-view. And number 9, Lacey Evans and Baron Corbin. From being in the main event at Extreme Rules to not even being on the card at all, WWE has taken a bold step by not having these two heat magnets at SummerSlam. Why? Well, it seems that Corbin's push may have finally come to an end with Paul Heyman in the driver's seat backstage on Raw. Heyman has a few names in mind on who he wants to push on Raw, and it seems that Evans and Corbin are not on the list. But those are some big superstars missing from the card. We've left the obvious 24/7 stooges like No Way Jose and Bobby Roode, who will do their usual Benny Hill impressions backstage chasing truth for the title, as well as Rusev, who always never gets included on a pay-per-view anyway. Our next story looks at Big Cass, who has made a shocking body transformation. Now, after his abrupt release from the WWE, Big Cass, aka Big C, aka Cass XL, was seen back on the independent circuit after riding out his 90-day no-compete clause with a much fuller figure in the ring. It seems that his loss of stardom caused the big man to struggle with anxiety and depression, which attributed to his weight gain. Cass spoke on the issue on DDP's yoga channel and mentioned, "I was just a wreck, man. A complete and utter wreck. I didn't know who to look to. I didn't know how I'm alive today. The amount that I was drinking was ridiculous. The food that I was putting in my body was ridiculous. No physical activity, chain-smoking cigarettes." Cass also spoke on suffering a seizure at a House of Hardcore show and revealed that beforehand he hadn't slept for 2 days. He saw this as a sign to turn his life around and get back into shape. He moved out of his home and moved in with someone who offered him to get him sober and help with his depression. Several months had passed, and thankfully, it seems that he has turned his life around completely, as Cass XL was looking ripped at a Cactus League wrestling show recently, where he cut a promo saying, "To everybody out there in the world that doubted me and said I was fat and out of shape, and they wrote me off and said I'd never be back in professional wrestling after a seizure nearly took my life in front of 1,500 people, I say this, I ain't dead yet." Our next story looks at Gail Kim calling out WWE for holding back Asian talent. Now, we don't see the Kabuki Warriors on television on a regular occasion, but it would be nice for the WWE to get their names right when they eventually appear, as eagle-eyed fans spotted an incorrect Twitter handle at the bottom of their entrance graphic. Instead of Asuka's Twitter, they inserted Io Shirai's. Now, we occasionally have a typo or two in our videos, so we won't judge WWE. However, the error didn't go down well with former WWE superstar Gail Kim, who tweeted, "Wow, so sad when they have the most talented Asian female wrestlers on the planet. Wake up WWE and stop wasting all of them. Utilize their talent." Do you agree with Kim? And our final story for today is a final match for a WWE superstar at SummerSlam. Former WWE Women's Champion Trish Stratus has returned for a one-off, some would say dream match against Charlotte Flair, making for a pro versus veteran clash-off at SummerSlam. However, this match will be her last hurrah in the ring, as she confirmed on SiriusXM's Busted Open Radio the match feels like a good ending. She mentioned, "I always sort of said, you know, retired, that's a loose term in wrestling, but I always said if there was something that was A, challenging, B, gonna do something for someone else, I would consider it. And of course, I love wrestling. It's something that's always going to be part of me and part of my life. I watch it, follow it, even if I don't do it every day. So when opportunities like this came up, it was like, gosh, this has to happen. Like Charlotte and I in the ring, you couldn't get together a better. I sort of feel like this is a good final match for me, because because I don't really think that you could do anything more than this. It feels like a good ending to me. A real ending. If this is indeed her last match, she'll almost certainly put Charlotte Flair over. What are your thoughts on the missing superstars, Big Cass's transformation, the error, and Trish's final match? Let us know in the comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.